Hi, Professor John Lyles. I am Santiago Romero, and I did the IRR analysis for our multiple alternatives. So, during our project, we're doing an EV conversion company, and just to show you the breadth of how much info I went in, I wanted to be as accurate, or at the very least, as in depth as I could possibly be. Hope I did a good job. So, just to get started, some of our alternatives. So, we currently have three alternatives. We have one, a per order electric vehicle conversion company. Numerous businesses, such as Foremost EV, offer EV conversions on a per order basis. Customers arrive in their gasoline powered cars, and for a fixed price, the business converts them. Although this strategy has worked well, it's labor intensive, has limited scalability, and links revenue to purchases placed by the customer. Our second alternative is a buy, convert, and sell model. According to this plan, the business would buy used cars, utilize standard conversion kits to turn them into electric vehicles, and then market the finished EVs. Thanks to value-added services, the strategy provides a more scalable firm with the possibility of higher profitability. And then alternative three, is a model hybrid strategy that combines the buy, convert, sell business with the per order conversion concept. So, let's get started. Here up top, I have I actually got this from it was actually in the content section for this class. And it essentially goes over the procedure for ROR for multiple alternatives. Just kept that up top, just keep me focused on the goal. And then further below, we have the financial information for this company, at the very least for this hypothetical company. Most of these are the same for every single alternative. So facilities and location, regardless of the alternative that we pick, we're still going to need a shop and we're still going to need an office space. Regardless of whether we're converting our own vehicles or for a customer, we still need a lift, we still need a jack, we still need power tools, welding equipment, EV conversion tools. We need everything. Apart from that, the one part where we do start seeing some differences is in ongoing costs. So ongoing costs, at the very least right here, it's per vehicle. Further along, we do convert this per vehicle cost into a per year cost depending on how many vehicles we produce. However, we'll get more into that in a second. So at the very least, the big difference between alternatives comes down here. So we have classic cars with blown engines and damaged EV for parts. If we're doing alternative 1, which I believe is the per order electric vehicle conversion, we would not purchase these classic cars with blown engines. If we are doing the classic car conversion or the hybrid, we would do this purchase. That is included down here. Once more, we'll get more into that in a second. Apart from that, we have our ranges for our revenues. And apart from that, we have our salvage value for what needs to be replaced every so amount of years. I labeled this 5 years. However, I do have some comments to make further along. Moving on, we have our financial information, total cost, present costs. Our total present cost in total is $1 million. I do want to make this note. This $1 million was originally $29,000. I made adjustments for this IRR analysis. In total, not counting the miscellaneous price, the actual total is approximately, I believe it is $40,000. So we can just double check like this. Our initial sum was $40,000. Moving on total ongoing costs. Going based off of this list, I extrapolated the data and separated it into a per vehicle, per month, per year, salary, and these two right here are a little special. This is damaged EV for parts, it's about $10,000. And we also have classic cars with blown engines, which I took an average between $1,000 and $15,000. I got $8,000. So, per vehicle, our cost for converting a vehicle with completely new parts is $31,500. Our per month expenses, extrapolated to be per year, is $2,020. Our per year costs are $3,500. And our yearly salary that we would have to pay out is for 6 employees is $390,000 a year. Apart from that, we took I highlighted these actual annual costs, and we'll come back to those in a second. Further along, I built this handy dandy chart. So this handy dandy chart breaks up the 3 alternatives up top. We have classic EV conversion, we have the hybrid conversion, and we have the customer conversions. So this is going to be a little difficult to explain. Right here we have new parts. This is the cost to convert a classic vehicle if we only use new parts, not including if we take parts from the damaged EV for parts. Down below we have mixed parts. So just because we do have this damaged EV that we can pull parts from, we can't continuously pull parts from it. So this is actually $10,000 plus $8,000. So we're taking the classic car with a blown engine because we're focusing on the classic EV conversion, plus the cost, $10,000 for taking parts from the EV, and an additional $5,000 just for new parts, just because the EVs we're buying are damaged, so we do need a couple extra 1,000 parts to fill in the gap. So just to show some of the basic math for how much one EV with mixed part would cost, $10,000 for the EV parts, for the used EV parts, $8,000 for the totaled vehicle that we are rebuilding, and then an additional 5,000 parts to get us to $23,000. Apart from that, we have the same conversion right here, except as you can tell, right here in new parts for classic EV conversion, this is $39,500. Over here, this is $31,500. The difference is $8,000. That's because if we're converting a customer's vehicle, we do not have to pay these $8,000 for the actual shell of the vehicle. We are taking the customer vehicle. Apart from that, we did something similar down here for mixed parts. As you can tell, because we are not using the shell of a vehicle, we don't have to buy it. So it's simply $10,000 plus the $5,000 for new parts. And then down in the middle, we have the hybrid parts. So on one side, we have the same values from the classic EV convert, and on the other side, we have the values for the customer conversions. What we will do with these values is we will then put them into certain scenarios. So in total, I calculated the costs for 12 scenarios. This is just part cost, not including salary, not including the per year purchases we have to make. This is only part cost so far. So for example, let's say we want to convert 6 classic cars with fully new parts. That's going to cost us $237,000 for all 6 vehicles. If we want to convert 6 customer vehicles with completely new parts, in total that's going to cost us $189,000 just in parts. So if you keep going down this list, you'll see that I did come up with some acronyms. So CEVC is up here. That stands for Classic EV Conversion. Apart from that, we also have CC, which stands for Customer Conversion. And further along, we also have a mix. So mix is simply mixed parts down here, as you can tell, but I was simply starting to run out of space. As you can tell, I accidentally overran the amount of space I had for text right here. But for example, to explain some of these a little bit more, scenario 2 is we produce 6 cars a year, and we are doing 6 classic car EV conversions. Our total cost using mixed parts will be $138,000. And for some more complicated ones, for example, scenario 3. For scenario 3, we have 3 new part classic EV conversion vehicles plus 3 mixed parts classic EV conversion vehicles. Our total for this is $187,500. As you can tell, it sits somewhere in between this value and this value, which it should. Down here, we have 3 new part customer conversion vehicles plus 3 mixed customer conversion vehicles. And our total cost for these 6 vehicles is $139,500. And finally down here, we have the hybrid. So in a hybrid scenario, we're doing part classic vehicle conversion and part customer vehicle conversion. As you can tell, when it's just a new vehicle, when we're doing fully new parts, it's pretty simple. When we're doing fully mixed parts, it's pretty simple. But once we're mixing new part vehicles and mixed part vehicles, it becomes a little complicated. So the way I've kind of formatted this is 2NP CEV plus CC. So essentially this means that in 1 year, we'll be doing 2 classic vehicle conversions with new parts and 2 customer conversions with new parts. And on this right side, we have 1 mix CEVC plus CC. So this means we're doing 1 classic EV conversion with mixed parts and 1 customer conversion with mixed parts. And our total for that would be $148,500, which once more sits in between just the mixed and just the new parts. And I did that scenario, and I replicated these types of scenarios for 12 different scenarios. So if you're curious what the cost, just parts cost, we're producing 20 new EVs. Well, yeah, I guess 20 new EVs. 20 new EV Mustangs, it'd be $790,000. Going further down, as much as I enjoyed getting these numbers together and as useful as they are, unfortunately, this is getting a little too in depth. So I separated it into the 3 mixed scenarios. So we have scenario 3, scenario 6, scenario 9, and scenario 12. Each of these scenarios is a situation where we're producing both electric vehicles with new parts and electric vehicles with mixed parts. But in addition to that, we're also not just including part costs. We're also including yearly costs. So for example, the CEVC for scenario 3, 6 vehicles, we go up here, is $187,500. So if we click right here, we have F110, $187,500, and the rest come from line 55, H55, I55, and L55, which if we go up to see what they are, just click on this. They are our per month costs extrapolated into a year, our per year costs still as a year, and then the yearly salary for the 6 employees we'll be paying. So moving on to this side, we have our total revenue for the 4 scenarios we're focusing on. 6 vehicles, 10 vehicles, 15 vehicles, and 20 vehicles. So how did I get these values? So if we go up to revenue, we can see we have the sale of EV converted vehicles, we have the conversion of customer provided vehicles. So CEVC for A1 for 6 vehicles, what I did was added $70,000 plus $220,000, divided that by 2 to take an average, and then multiplied that by 6 to get our total revenue for producing 6 vehicles in a year with a mix. This is an average. I did the same thing for 10 vehicles, scenario 6, 15 vehicles, scenario 9, and 20 vehicles, scenario 12. Where it does get interesting is, although I do think these are accurate values, I don't necessarily believe they're fully realistic. Not everyone is going to be spending $145,000 on an EV conversion. Most people are going to opt for the $70,000 conversion or the $50,000 conversion. So going further down, we have just the cheapest and also just the most expensive vehicles. So for example, this $420,000 a year for total revenue, I got by multiplying $70,000 by 6. Right here we have customer converted vehicles, which for example, that's $50,000 divided by 6 for each vehicle. 50 times 6. And right here where we have the hybrid, what I did was I took 300,000, I added it to 420,000, and then I divided it by 2 to get an average. $360,000 a year if we produce 6 vehicles and sell them at the lowest price we possibly can. Moving on to the right, we have salvage value after 5 years. So what I did was I took all the tools and equipment that eventually need to be replaced. We have the automotive lift, we have the power tools, the EV conversion tools, we have the fabrication tools, safety gear. All of that needs to be replaced. I'm assuming it needs to be replaced after 5 years. And so what I did was I took the original value, took 20% of that value, and then that became the salvage value. So our total salvage, summing up all the values, including just some stock, for example, we might have 3 motors in stock that we've just always had, never got to use, and unfortunately after 5 years simply need to be discarded. That's $3,000, well, salvaged. That's $3,000 in salvage value. So, if we look down here, all I did was I took the sum of all this column and then added it together to receive $17,560. So, now the difficult bit. This has already been a lot, you'd be surprised. So, down here we have the ROR analysis of multiple alternatives. So, we have A1, A2, A3, B1, all the way to D3. Where did I get these? So, A1 is scenario 3, the median price. Well, the median revenue we can take. Excuse me. A2 is obviously the lowest revenue we could get for each possible vehicle sale, and so on. So, as you can see right here, our initial cost throughout, I actually need to update this, or else my numbers below will be wrong for a second. That value is just there to prove a point, and I will make that point in 1 second. Apologies, so now my values should be more correct. I also need to edit this. You'd be impressed. I'm about to blow your mind with how much money we're actually making. So, let me just double check these values are right. Yep, looks right for now. So, our initial cost is, actually this needs to be $1 million. Initial cost is $1 million. That is coming from our total initial cost right here, $1 million. Yep, everything still looks right. Apart from that, our net cash flow per year is all right here. So what I did was, as you can see, I opened it up. I took our revenues for producing 6 vehicles. This is A1. Right here it says A1. This is a median. Also right here, we can see it's CEVC. So I took this value and then subtracted it from our total cost for producing 6 vehicles in scenario 3 right here. Just moving on. Took this, subtracted from this. Coming over here, took R40, which is our lowest revenue for producing customer converted vehicles, and I subtracted it from our total price for converting 6 customer vehicles. And I continued this until I had 12 different alternatives. So A1 to A3 is if we produce 6 cars in a year. B1 to B3 is if we produce 10 vehicles in a year. C1 to C3 is if we produce 15 vehicles in a year. D1 to D3 is if we produce 20 vehicles in a year. Then each one of those values is broken down into, are we just doing classic vehicle conversions? Are we converting vehicles for the customers? Or are we doing a mixture of both? So, following down, I want to make some notes based on this ROR analysis of multiple alternatives. I just want to be clear, I was as accurate as I could possibly be, and I had some errors. But we'll get into that in a second. So, No. A1 through D3 are all corresponding to the revenue values stated in the selection total revenue A. So that's what I stated before. I took A1 to D3, all from these values. These net cash values correspond to these revenues minus their costs. Note: net cash flow per year was calculated by subtracting values and cost per year based on certain scenarios from their corresponding values in total revenue A. Once more, just what I said before, I took this value and I subtracted it by these values in order to calculate my net cash flow per year. Note: cost per year based on certain scenarios is the assumed cost for selling a mixture of new part and used part EV converted vehicles, i.e. variable revenue vehicles. As such, net cash flow per year is most accurate in sections A1, B1, C1, and D1, where the average revenue of all vehicles, both new and used part, sold in a year is stated to be the following. As such, only values A1, B1, C1, and D1 will be compared amongst themselves for the IRR to be as fair as possible. Once more, as I stated, all these revenues right here are for mixed, I'm so sorry. All these values right here, A1, B1, C1, D1, are all mixture variable revenue vehicles. So I took the average between 70,000 and 222,000, and I took the average from 50,000 to 200,000. So, obviously we can't sell an EV with used parts for $220,000. That would be absurd. If we're putting used parts into the vehicle, we're usually going to sell it for the lower end, in this case $70,000. Or in this case, if a customer is asking us to convert their vehicle with used parts, we'd only charge them $50,000. So, because I only have these total costs per year, which are all hybrids, and these are all for mixed parts, I didn't mean hybrids, apologies. That means that the IRR will be most accurate when the net cash flow is most accurate, which will be for sections A1, B1, C1, and D1, which still breaks down to be 12 different alternatives because I need to break down CEVC, CC, and hybrid. So, further along, this I will bring up in a second. It is interesting, but I will mention it right now. However, I don't believe the revenue calculated for sections A1, B1, C1, and D1 are actually the most realistic. Revenues in section A1, B1, C1, and D1 are calculated on the assumption that the average customer converted vehicle will sell for $125,000 and that the average classic converted vehicle will sell for $145,000. And while yes, there are buyers for these products, just statistically speaking, these wouldn't be our biggest sellers. A more realistic revenue would be somewhere between sections A1 and A2, between B1 and B2, C1 and C2, and D1 and D2, as we would have the occasional customer who would spend $200,000 to $220,000 on a conversion, but the vast majority of customers would be more willing to spend $50,000 to $70,000 on a conversion, which is still an incredible amount of money considering it's quite literally the mean personal income in the US. As such, I will conduct an IRR analysis on values A2, B2, C2, and D2 together. However, I just want to note that this analysis will be less accurate, as their net cash flows will be calculated using the same cost from scenarios 3, 6, 9, and 12, which were calculated using more new parts than the affordable conversions would. The affordable conversions would mostly only use used parts, and scenarios 3, 6, 9, and 12 include new parts. More new parts than used parts, actually. But to be more specific, i.e., costs are higher and net cash flows lower than they should be for their corresponding revenues. However, considering However, considering I'm performing, let me add that. Considering I'm performing an IRR on sections A1 through D1 alone, technically involve 12 different alternatives, I hope you can forgive these errors. Like I said previously, I'm trying to be as accurate as possible, but quite frankly, with this much variability, there's just a mental limit on how much I can take. So, we're going to start breaking it down. Questions to answer. What is the IRR between all the options/alternatives? Provided our MAR is 15 per year, what option should we proceed with? So, right here, I broke it down as following this guide and as following your actual podcast. Oh man, am I not going to be able to pull it up? A little bit of a shame. I must have closed. No, it's just another tab, is it not? Here. I was actually following your podcast. So I at the very least broke it down following Mod 7 Chapter 8 ROR multiple alt example notes, following this example specifically. So going back, I separated all 12 different alternatives out, put their initial costs, put their net cash per year, put their salvage value, and put their life years. I then charted it all out, and I will say at some point we started getting values that were either too big or too small to actually be counted. Just unfortunate. So for example, right here, between B1CC and B1CEVC, we would actually receive a negative delta A. As such, I wouldn't receive any actual delta I star, but considering this is negative and this one is positive, I eliminated B1_CC. I hope my reasoning for why I excluded and kept some of these NA is understandable. However, as you can tell right here, originally, let's see here. So I had to eliminate A1_CEVC because our delta I was simply, our delta I star is simply not over 15%. I kept going until my delta star I was 66%, and that came with B1CEVC. It will be a common trend to see that most CEVC are actually our highest margin products, simply because, as stated beforehand, right here, if we buy, convert, sale, this provides more scalability with the firm and the possibility of higher profitability, which it does. So, going through the end, at the end, when we compare D1_CEVC and C1CEVC, we eliminate C1_CEVC. Conclusion. And of all possible alternatives, a company where we only convert classic cars into electric vehicles and resell them for a profit is the best choice. Additionally, to meet a MAR of 15% given inserted data, we must produce at least 10 of these conversions a year to meet our MAR. And we make 10 of our conversions at B1 CEVC. So, going down, we're now doing the A2 comparison. As previously stated, following the guide, I did my best to break it up. And here, it was a little bit rougher, actually getting the delta I star, simply because so many of these vehicles, so many of these alternatives are actually in the red. So, rate will continue to break until delta A is positive. I continued until I had a positive delta A. That first delta A came in C2_CEVC, which is right here. So I compared that value. I unfortunately received a delta I star of negative 7%. So I continued to exclude vehicles until I got to D2CEVC, where I finally received a delta I star of 23%. Conclusion. Out of all possible alternatives, a company where we only convert classic vehicles into electric cars and resell them at a profit is the best choice. Additionally, to meet a MAR of 15% given inserted data, we must produce at least 20 conversions a year to meet our MAR of 15%. So for the most part, that is the conclusion to, I want to call this research at this point. I really broke this down as best as I could. But going into some of the issues I actually faced. I actually believe this business would be significantly more profitable than even this IRR analysis makes it out to be. So, as you could tell beforehand, I actually made my initial cost $1 million. The reason I did this was because if I used our actual initial cost of $40,000, my delta I star would break every single time. So if I edit this value and do negative $40,000, 1, 2, 3, I immediately don't get a value, simply because my delta I star is too high to actually be recognized. So considering that, I imagine we may even be profitable within the first year. Not only that, but my salvage value is actually misleading. I put salvage value after 5 years. These values were actually gotten from a salvage value after 10 years. In the rates I adjusted right here, if I open them up right here, I have rate 5. If I make this rate 10, does go up to 23%, which is quite useful. But for example, if I do rate 10 right here, I no longer get a number. So, why do I say that my salvage value should be 10 years and not 5? Simply speaking, most of this equipment won't break after 5 years. I actually did the analysis. I used ChatGPT. Sue me if you wish. I essentially put the list of these parts in the ChatGPT and asked, when should I sell these to replace them? Or when will these break down? Most will actually break down and have to be sold or salvaged further than 10 years. The automotive lift lasts between 15 to 20 years. The hydraulic jack, 15 to 20 years. There's one thing here that would even last 25 years. But I had to downplay this to 5 years in order to actually get some values for the IRR that weren't just all hashtag num exclamation mark. As such, I imagine this company to be significantly more profitable than even I'm just letting on right now. Not only that, but I actually had to increase my costs to not continuously get hashtag num exclamation mark. I put that this company has 6 employees. If we're only producing 6 vehicles in a year, I really estimate at the most we would need is 2. And so if I go in here, I believe this one is calling from here. If I change this to be 2 customers, and then scroll down here, that now puts all the initial cost breakdown for every single low-cost vehicle, puts it in the green. We're no longer in the red. If I hire 6 people to produce 6 vehicles in a year for the lowest I can sell them, then yes, I am the red. If I do Control Z right now, it's all in the red. However, if I only hire 2 people, the only one that's almost in the red is if I do 6 customer conversions in a year. Which I believe is insane. If I were to show, I will do one rate based off of the actual data I got going off of this. So not the $1 million initial start, but actually the 40,000. Let me show you how it goes. So if I pop over here, I do rates. Like I said, I believe the actual salvage, the lifetime should be 10 years. Then I have to do a delta A. I will take the delta A from, let's say, A2 CEVC, which is right here. I then subtract that from the initial cost, which was actually 40,000, and then the salvage value of 17. Immediately I get a number that is so high, it can't even process it. So I actually believe this business to be significantly more profitable than even just these numbers let on. The reason I'm using these numbers more than anything, it's going back, there it is. The reason I'm using these numbers is just to actually show I'm performing an IRR analysis correctly. Just to show that, yeah, there are points where we will be negative, there are points where we will be below the MAR, and there are points where we will be above the MAR. And this is where we want to be. But if I truly calculated this with all the numbers I should be having, my MAR is essentially over 100% every single time. Even right here, just changing 40,000. It's quite impressive. I believe the real issue why this type of business has not taken off is more just the customer base. I don't believe there's enough customers out there that truly want to purchase EV conversion vehicles. One, they're just a downgrade from regular EV vehicles. Because we're doing a conversion because we're using the shell of a car that wasn't made for EVs, they're significantly lower range. A Tesla Model 3 at the minimum has 200 miles of range. A converted classic Mustang would have at most 90. Which means for quick charge times, unfortunately just means customers aren't necessarily interested. So I believe that's the real thing that's holding back this industry. Not necessarily actual cost. Oh, I mean, it's also very expensive, $70,000. Not many people want to do that. But I believe the customer base and simply the exorbitant price is what's holding back these vehicles. For $70,000, you could buy 3 Tesla Model 3s. And these vehicles are depreciating assets, as all cars are. Just because I converted a classic Mustang to an EV doesn't mean it's magically going to gain or net you money every month. But so yeah, this has been my IRR analysis. Thank you for your time. I do apologize for this video being very long. I simply gave it my all. I wanted to be as succinct, I wanted to be as in-depth as possible, and I wanted to create a true economic analysis. I truly wanted to have something that I felt could be used, that someone could break down and say, oh, this is a good idea, oh, this is not a good idea, as I truly am passionate about this. And so, this is my breakdown. Thank you for your time. I hope I explained this in a manner that is beneficial towards us getting a good grade on this. I really spent a lot of time. It's actually 5 a.m. But I'm quite happy with the work I've done. Thank you very much.